Welcome to Inside The Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Kevin Gray, Mavs pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network, joined as always by my partner, Grant Afseth, Mavs Sports Illustrated writer for the Dallas Mavericks. Really appreciate you joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube, on my channel at Kevin Gray Sports, or on Grant's channel at Grant Afseth, you can catch both of us on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports and at Grant Afseth there on Twitter. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a review while you're there. It's our Friday episode as we get ready to send you into the weekend to talk a little Mavericks basketball. Mavericks played the Timberwolves on Thursday night. They get ready to play the Portland Trail Blazers on Saturday night before they continue their 2-game road trip on Monday when they take on the reigning NBA champion Denver Nuggets. So a lot to get into over the next half hour or so here on Inside the Mavs. Again, really appreciate you joining us however and wherever you may be listening to us. As I bring in my partner, Grant Afseth. Grant, what's going on, man? How we doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking forward to talking about the Mavs for sure.
Yeah, the Mavs took on the Minnesota Timberwolves on Thursday night, and coming into the game, Minnesota tied for the best record in the entire NBA at 17-5. That remained the same at the end of Thursday night as both the Boston Celtics and the Minnesota Timberwolves won. So both of them now at 18-5 after the Timberwolves got an 18-point win at the American Airlines Center, despite the fact that Luka Doncic had 39 points and 13 assists. Unfortunately, Kyrie Irving was not available once again in this game. And Grant, in this particular matchup, we talk about it all the time when it comes to this team. They live by the three and they die by the three. They died by it on Thursday night, hitting a season-low 7 3-pointers, as it was not a good shooting night, particularly in the second half, where the Mavericks only made 1 3-pointer on 14 attempts in the second half, where Minnesota really kind of just took it to them, especially on the defensive end during the second half for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely a struggle to knock down threes. I think it was, in the post game, it was kind of just one of those nights from Luka and Jason Kidd in their comments, kind of just talking about how sometimes you're just going to be flat. And, definitely I think it doesn't help whenever you're much smaller than a guy like Karl Towns and you're having to be, physical with him throughout a full game. So I think that definitely adds to having one of those nights. So overall, I think you rely on the three like that. It's definitely going to be challenging at times. Like, Derrick Jones did a great job on the ball against Anthony Edwards, but if, it's going to be a tough situation if you're also not making the defense pay on the other end by knocking down those open threes. And then you also have Grant Williams, who, he struggled being 6'6". That's to be expected against Karl Towns and, the front court guys like that. But then to come up empty from three on the other end was a significant challenge. And that's a night when you definitely want to have Kyrie Irving available, who can kind of get downhill, attack the weaker perimeter matchup, and make other guys work. Get creative with screening to get Jaden McDaniels off of Luka a little easier. They were good at that at times. With Luka being a screener for like Dante Exum and doing little things like that, but it's much quicker when you have another superstar available that can, really pose that threat, and you can attack from different spots on the floor and, just have more punch whenever Luka's off the court as well. That's a big part of it. And you can give him more opportunities to be off the court, because it's hard when you have 1 minute and 30 seconds at the end of the third quarter, that's really the extent of him sitting for, a lot of these recent games. That starts to really wear on him. But he still did a great job overall in his performance, but just too much to handle for a team that doesn't have Kyrie, I feel like. And definitely a lot of things to take away before that next time they play around New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I mean, Luka goes 15-27, has 13 assists, 39 points, was extremely efficient, on the night, but he just couldn't get anybody to come with him. I mean, you look at the box score. I mean, the Mavericks got outscored by the bench, 56-25. Like, you got outscored by 31 points. And thanks to Naz Reid, who had a spectacular night off the bench with 27 points, hitting, 7 3-pointers of the game, that didn't help much. And I think one of the big things I took away from that game was, from a matchup perspective, even with Kyrie, there's a different style that Minnesota has chosen to play, which is when everybody decided to zig, they zagged. They said, we're going to go as big as we can, as athletic as we can, and we're going to put pressure with guys like Karl Anthony Towns who can knock down shots from the outside from the big man spot. Obviously, Rudy Gobert and what he does in controlling the paint on the defensive end. But Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Anthony Edwards, who didn't have a great shooting night at all. In fact, I think he went 3 of 19 from the field, against the Mavericks. But they present a lot of matchup issues that I think even with them being at full strength would be a very difficult matchup for them in the playoffs. What did you think about the styles that both of these teams incorporated, particularly, the Timberwolves with how much length and size and athleticism that they present, especially in their front court?
Yeah, I think with the way you talked about it with the Timberwolves, with their size and their combination of size and athleticism, if you're not going to be hitting from three, it's going to be a very long night because there are going to be a lot of little opportunities for them where the ball is just going to bounce their way. Like Karl Towns and Grant Williams fighting for rebounding positioning, the ball is just going to find Karl Towns. Like there was a time where he just kind of it just kind of fell in his hands and he just didn't even leave his feet and just put it back up and then went in and like things like that. Like it's just sometimes it's a very simple game where someone's bigger than someone else and you just don't think you can really do about that. And that's kind of how the Timberwolves are. They're able to maximize that advantage with Rudy Gobert playing at that Defensive Player of the Year caliber level this season. I think with him being healthy and them also having that continuity to establish after last season. They were in and out of the lineup a lot, and this year they've been available and able to build on what they really intended when they made that trade initially. And I think that's just going to continue to become difficult for other teams because, as you said, a lot of teams don't really have that bigger four that can handle a guy like Karl Towns. And with the Timberwolves looking to pack the paint as well, there was a lot of wide open looks for the Mavs, and they just weren't making them pay at all. Like that changes things a little different if you're having a hot performance because then they're going to have to really look to get out on those shots and it opens things up a little more. But that's definitely a tough matchup to where a team that lives and dies by the three definitely has to live and die by the three because someone we didn't mention with the shooting performance like Tim Hardaway Jr. He really struggled as well, and that's someone that they've been able to rely on off the bench to have big nights. Like earlier in the season, he wouldn't be someone I would be surprised by having 20-something points, making 5 threes, 6 threes, and being a problem for whoever they really play. And he just didn't have it yesterday, and that's just a tough overall night to have where two guys, in addition to Hardaway, not having it as the high volume 3-point shooters. Alongside Luka, that's a lot to really overcome, especially with without having Kyrie, as we said. He's someone that can kind of diversify how you're looking to score, whether he's getting into gaps in the defense and just pulling up or getting to the rim. They don't really have too much of that outside of Luka and Kyrie. Dante Exum's been able to provide that as of late at times. But, they didn't really fully utilize him, I felt like, with the minutes. I felt like they kind of went away from him a little bit more than I was expecting with the injuries. But, I think there's just a bit of a limited attack that doesn't quite have the ideal personnel to handle, that type of size defensively. And, you definitely have to have your identity going for you in a situation like that. And it wasn't yesterday for sure.
Yeah, just to use that as an example, Grant Williams and Derrick Jones Jr. went a combined 2 of 13 from 3. Like that just gives you an indication of how poor the shooting was with respect to that. And I want to ask you this because one of the things I was really interested in going into last night's game, we saw the return of Derrick Jones Jr. after he missed, the game with the right quad, contusion against the Lakers. But we saw Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. in the same lineup together to start the game. What did you think about the combination of those two effectively together, especially knowing how well Exum had been playing going into the game against Minnesota, and then with the length and the shooting that we've seen from Derrick Jones Jr. so far? What did you think of that lineup combination with both of them on the floor at the same time?
Yeah, I think I like the idea of it because, you're going to have Derrick Jones probably still handle a lot of the tough assignments as he did, like with Anthony Edwards pretty often. And that frees up Exum to, handle another tougher player as well. And, having that balance of playmaking with Exum and the ability to get to the rim as well with Luka alongside him, I think that brings you a lot of options. I do think if the shot's not falling, they're definitely a perimeter combination where they're more susceptible to that since they aren't like true knockdown shooters. Like they can get hot and have nights where they're making 5 threes. Each of them have done that this season. Even Exum making 7. And I think Derrick Jones has had some nights, or at least one night where he's made 6. So it's not like an impossibility by any stretch for them to shoot really well from 3. But they're definitely not like those traditional sharpshooters where you would expect those like big nights on a fairly consistent basis. So I definitely, I think that's probably where you'd have some limitation if they're daring you to shoot, like if the Timberwolves defense is, and they're not,
or like how the Lakers
converting.
did against Exum on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and then like he made them pay by maybe 7, but they're I think in terms of their track record as shooters, they're more susceptible to kind of bail out the defense for making them. Daring them to shoot. And, with Grant Williams also struggling on the same night as well, like that's just not going to be a great combination. But in general, that's probably not going to happen too often. So I do like the general idea of that, that lineup combo because you kind of still have that spacing. You have the athleticism, you have the size. Like, is that the smallest player in that group is Dante Exum. I mean, maybe even Derrick Jones. I think they're both 6'6" or listed at 6'6", 6'7", whatever, for Derrick Jones. So I think overall, like that gives you a lot of defensive versatility. You can get out and run in transition because Exum has been pretty much like the most important player in terms of pushing the pace. I feel like on the team this season, Kyrie gets a lot of credit for it and well deserved. But I do think like statistically in the on-off numbers, you would see that the pace really is controlled when Exum's out there. He does a great job of pushing it, and he's been praised for that like pretty often and credited for it. So, I think overall when you have that combination, there's a lot to like about it, on both ends. But definitely need the threes to fall at a little bit better of a clip than how it was going yesterday to make that fully maximized.
And you brought up something very interesting, which is why I'm so fascinated over these next couple of games to see how these two play together, because for me, it's going to formulate for me what lineup I want to see once Kyrie Irving comes back, because you mentioned something about Dante Exum in terms of his ability to push the pace and transition. A little bit better of a ball handler in my mind when it comes to him versus Derrick Jones Jr. And the idea is if Dante Exum continues to knock down threes at the rate that we believe he can based off what we've seen from him so far this year, I feel like a lineup of Luka, Kyrie, Dante Exum, Grant Williams, and Derek Lively gives me the most versatility defensively while also having another ball handler and creator a little bit, especially in transition, that can help facilitate offense more so than Derrick Jones. And then Jones can come off the bench to be able to help out that second unit with Tim Hardaway Jr. and also Kyrie Irving running that second unit as well. That to me would be the lineup based off of what we've seen so far and what X has been able to do over the last several games. But these next few games are really going to tell me about what lineup I want to see once Kyrie comes back, because I want to maximize as much defensive versatility as I can while also as much ball handling and creativity, especially if they're going to play with this type of pace throughout the rest of the year. I think Dante Exum gives them a little bit more of that based on their current roster construction right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think if you're thinking about depth for the full 48 minutes, when Josh Green eventually gets back, he can help provide some of that ball handling, responsibility. And he also is someone that can help you push the pace or at least leak out in transition, alongside Kyrie. And I felt like, last season and, this season, he's very comfortable alongside Kyrie or even just Luka in those like single star sort of lineups. So I think when you have Exum in that starting group, he's someone, whether you watch him with Australia or with the Mavs, he's very comfortable and embraces picking up full court. That's something that I asked him about in Portland after, his recent start, up there. And he mentioned that he takes pride in picking up full court, guarding the toughest matchups, things like that. And, that's something that you would want to have from either Derrick Jones or Josh Green, any of those guys that you have tried or, can try at the 3 spot alongside Luka and Kyrie. And I think, the big differences you get with Exum is that, not only does he have like the improved shooting that he's shown this season after returning to the NBA, over the last couple games, really getting comfortable, embracing that aggressive, let it fly mentality more instead of turning down some of those shots. But I think a very underrated part of Exum is that he's a true point guard. Like those other guys are not true point guards. And he can get you into your offense, and that's something that he's also been, really credited with. Is he's a very reliable option to get you into your set, get people organized, And that's a real luxury to have in a player that's playing next to Luka and Kyrie. Not many
Yeah.
players have the size to do that. So when you have, the versatility of someone who's a very willing screener and a lethal threat like Kyrie alongside Luka, you can get really creative with off-ball stuff. Like they've done it with like zoom actions, like one of them screening for the other before they get a handoff from Derek Lively. And that's just more possible when you have Exum to bring the ball up and trust that you can get into that, but also other things as well, because you can really hunt matchups with Exum because he's a steady-handed guy that can get downhill as well. Like as we talked about in the last episode against the Memphis Grizzlies, one example that really stands out is like he's just patient. Like he just attacked downhill, didn't have something, pulled it out, attacked again, like on a redrive, and then just throws a lob to Derek Lively and he
Yeah.
finishes it. Like you don't really get that from other guys because they're not true point guards, like Exum. So that's just one of those interesting, like just combination of skill sets that you get that when you think about like really interesting NBA lineups and what makes, some of the top teams really hard to handle. You need to have those like kind of unique combination of attributes, I feel like, and I think Exum at the 3 really brings that those advantages that are really hard to really solve for, because there's not many teams that have that many perimeter defenders, and there's always going to be someone that you're going to want to hide, and they're probably going to be put on Grant Williams, and you can get creative with screening actions with him as well. You can bring him up like in those switch hunting, just like single screen situations, but also put him in as a double screener in like double drag or like off-ball screening actions. It just becomes a nightmare if you're an opposing team. You can't really hide guys as well. And if you're going to hide him on Dante Exum, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to attack the paint and make you pay for it.
And he's very capable of doing it. It's funny because Jason Kidd during the pregame show, talking with Chuck Cooperstein, said, Dante Exum reminds him a lot of Sean Livingston. And if you're a true NBA fan and somebody who's watched the game over the years, you know how good Sean Livingston was with his length, his versatility, his defensive prowess, good ball handler as well. I thought that was a very interesting and astute comp that Jason Kidd gave for Dante Exum, because a lot of those things Exum has provided from a ball handling standpoint, basketball IQ. You mentioned being able to get the offense set and get them where they need to be, but also the wherewithal to be able to attack and then re-attack when he has the opportunities, to do it. And Livingston was really good at a lot of those similar skill sets, that Dante Exum presents. So that, to me, again, over the next several games, however long Kyrie Irving is out and how much longer we see the combination of Derrick Jones Jr. and Dante Exum in the same lineup together, not only how they play together, both offensively and defensively, but what that means for the depth of this team. As you mentioned, once Josh Green comes back, once some of these guys start to get healthy, I think Exum would be the right guy to leave in the starting lineup, even when Kyrie Irving comes back, to have that combination of multiple ball handlers, but also guys that can facilitate offense and, again, get up and down in pace in transition, which they weren't able to do a lot of against Minnesota because, you give Minnesota a lot of credit. Yes, Mavericks shot themselves out of the game with the inability to knock down three-pointers. But they held the Mavericks to 41 points in the second half after giving up 60 in the first half, where the Mavericks were able to take a 1-point lead in the halftime after a late, Luka Doncic layup to end the second quarter there. I guess I'm not as concerned about this loss because you look at how good Minnesota's played so far. They're tied for the best record in the NBA. This is a really good team that I feel like if you're at full strength, you are a lot more competitive in this game. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not as concerned about a loss like this against a really good team where you couldn't knock down shots and you couldn't get a lot of production off your bench. I think if things are a little bit more even in some of those areas, I think this is a little bit more competitive game, especially what we saw in the first half of the Mavericks. They had a 15-point lead at 19-4 to start the game. They were playing really well. Minnesota just grinded them out in the second half there.
Yeah, and I think all those things you mentioned, plus struggles to not turn the ball over, became a real problem.
Yeah,
like they had
turnovers
some just
were a real
kind of
problem.
like pick six turnovers where you're just like giving it up and they're just getting down the floor on the other end. Those are just momentum killers. If you're trying to come back, from even a decent deficit, that's just too much to overcome. And I feel like that's something that they pointed to, like Jason Kidd mentioned. Like they usually don't turn the ball over. They're really phenomenal at controlling it, but also they don't turn it over usually early. Like they just had a ton of like uncharacteristic turnovers. And they've had some nights like where Luka tries some passes that are challenging and they don't connect, which, throughout 82 games, you're going to have that. But,
Yeah.
Overall, I think, that's definitely one of those areas where when you're at full strength, it's a lot easier to kind of play, more under control, not take as many chances like that, where, you're going to be susceptible to those turnovers throughout a game. But yeah, definitely, I think a lot you can build on going forward, where it all starts with having better perimeter shooting, because there's only so much you can do for sure whenever you're just being left completely wide open and you're just barely hitting front rim on some of these shots for sure.
It's the epitome of a make or miss league, and last night was definitely a very good example of what it means to look when you're knocking down shots, things are going well. When you are, things can go really poorly. And for this team in particular, they've got to be able to knock down threes at a high rate. I mean, they came into the game, I guess, in Minnesota leading the NBA in 3-pointers made with 374. So it just shows you the reliance that they have on the ability to knock down shots from the outside. And when it doesn't fall, this team was not able to find and generate a lot of offense, even with a guy like Derrick Lively II, who I thought played pretty well at times, still working through things like foul trouble and those kinds of things. But I thought, and that was another observation I wanted to have going into the game, was how would Lively perform against two versatile big men, one on the defensive side, of course, with Rudy Gobert, and then dealing with a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns on the other end. I thought Derrick Lively II held his own in this game and was able to be in this game quite a bit, even with some of the foul trouble that he was dealing with.
Yeah, honestly, it was a very intriguing matchup as well, because those are the two teams that went over to Abu Dhabi, and I paid close attention to that one. With the two games, and something that was a big difference between those set of games and last night was Derrick Lively was very frequently like sealed off by like Rudy Gobert. Like he just looked like a rookie in Abu Dhabi, where there was like a lot of wide open layups that were being given up. And I think he also looked much less comfortable as a screener at that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's like flipping the screen direction. Now he's like slipping with more precision to get out of the screen when they're really already pressuring Luka. And there's just a lot more synergy that he has. Like I remember in Vegas where Jared Dudley was coaching him up on like just simply setting a screen during summer league practices.
I remember. We all remember that. That's right.
Yeah, yes. like that was just like completely different situation where he's like a fast learner. He's like, I was just very impressed with how he handled it yesterday, because it's very challenging to be able to produce as a rim roller with Rudy Gobert on the floor. Like that's like a big thing that they're going to look to take away. And for him to, counter how Luka was being pressured, him being blitzed, hedged, all that stuff, I thought there was a lot to like about that, especially going forward. And, especially out of that short roll score, he had a Euro step and scored at the rim. Like those are just things like, even when they turned to Dwight Powell, which was like kind of a resemblance of last season's roster with how they were limited. He doesn't really like look at the rim like on the short rolls. Like that's just a limitation of his game. And Maxi Kleber as well, when he's healthy, those guys are looking to get the ball to the open shooter, which in most situations you are going to look to do that unless there's like some advantage where there's a cutter who's attacking an out of rotation defense, or you're just truly able and willing to put the ball on the floor to get to the rim. But I just think you have more options with that threat with Lively, because he's showing more and more that he's going to be able to put the ball on the floor, and he has the physical tools to do it. Like he can finish over the top, he can play through, contact, uses athleticism, things like that. Those are just, things that are beyond the skill set of the other guys on the roster at the five. And, that's just great things that you want to see against a top team, where he's not just doing it. Well, I guess you could say, Oklahoma City is definitely one of the top teams. So he did do it against another, top team, but it's not like he's just doing against like a Portland, sort of team. And you're like, that's a flash I would like to see against a better team.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's doing it against, each level of competition. And, overall continuing to build will definitely be interesting, because we're, not even at Christmas yet, and he's made a lot of strides. And that's something that we're going to say a lot throughout the whole season, is just how impressive his development's been. And I'm very fascinated to see, how it looks, heading into the All-Star break in a couple months as well. And, even on that, the rewatch ability that we have on around New Year's against the Timberwolves again, that'll be interesting to see when he, hopefully has Kyrie Irving available, which, we don't really know when he'll be
Right. We
available
don't
yet.
know at
But
this point when he's coming back. Yeah.
for sure, having a full strength look or closer to full strength look would be definitely interesting with another opportunity against Minnesota. And I think, even without Kyrie, how Lively produced is another, big benefit to, what the Mavs have to take away from last game. It's a lot easier to operate when you have two superstars, and, only having one. He has one hell of a superstar with Luka when he's available. But so it's not to say like, oh, he had to overcome these challenges by any stretch. Like that's a massive luxury to have. But things are definitely a lot more difficult to solve for a defense when you have another superstar on the floor, and the release valve will naturally benefit which is Lively on the back end for sure.
Mavericks are now 15-9 on the season. Last few minutes of our show as the Mavericks now get ready to take on the Portland Trail Blazers, who they just played what will be a week ago when they get together again on Saturday when they won the 125-112 game on December 9th on the road in Portland. That was one of the two games that were scheduled once the in-season tournament was finally put together. And, of course, the Lakers went on to win the in-season tournament. So interesting to see these two teams back together once again. Last time these two teams got together, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe played really well for them, scoring in a lot of different ways, in a variety of ways. Mavericks should win this game based off of the personnel that they have. Obviously, you can't look ahead to Monday as they get ready to take on, the Denver Nuggets, because if you do look ahead, Portland has some guys that can score, as I mentioned, with Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, that if you don't, they could catch you, in Portland. A team that's, while record-wise not very good, it's a young, scrappy team that plays hard for Chauncey Billups, and you could tell that there's some potential there. Mavericks will need to make sure that they're on their P's and Q's and handle business. Otherwise, Portland could possibly, catch them in a game that the Mavericks shouldn't lose on the road on Saturday night.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's definitely hard to beat a team twice in a short period of time. So that's naturally going to be something that you'll watch for. And, as you said, Billups, he really likes to mix things up a lot defensively. He, like, as a former player, he knows you can't just let a superstar like Luka see one defense over and over again. And it's definitely a lot easier for a defense to throw out those different looks when you don't have to account for someone like Kyrie on the floor. So that's going to be something to watch as well. They were aggressive with full court pressure. They were physical with him in the half court, face guarding him off the ball, and how the Mavericks move Luka around and utilize Dante Exum as well again in that sort of setting. I think will be an important X factor because you definitely don't want to put too much of a burden on Luka playing 40 plus minutes on a nightly basis while also having to handle that full court pressure, physical defense over and over and over again. So those will definitely be important things to watch. The Trailblazers have a lot of athleticism, and they've actually been one of the better defenses in the league since kind of figuring things out a little bit more and trying different personnel. And they've dealt with a lot of injuries as well. Jeremy Grant was in concussion protocol in their last matchup. Brogdon, Ayton were sidelined as well. So I'm not too in tune with the the Trailblazers injury situation, but those are also things to watch as well because they're definitely a different team when they have some of those veteran guys out there as well. So just definitely an interesting matchup, just as like a microcosm of how the Mavericks can make things easier for Luka against teams that really want to pressure and be physical for sure.
Yeah, Simons and Sharpe combined for 54 points in that game. Of course, for the Mavericks, Luka Doncic had 32 points the last time these two teams got together. Dante Exum was excellent. He had 23 points in the game, going 9 of 15 from the field. Derrick Jones Jr. also had 14 points. He was a plus 21 in that game and really was able to help he and Exum, down the stretch, be able to help the Mavericks win that game. So, like you said, it's hard to beat a team 2 times within a week. The Mavericks will look to do that before they travel to Denver on Monday to take on the reigning NBA champion Denver Nuggets. And we always know that when Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic get together, that's always a fun time to be had, both on and off the floor when it comes to those two. But the Mavericks got to handle business on Saturday when they take on the Portland Trail Blazers. That game will be at 8:30 or 8 o'clock, with tip-off at 8 o'clock. Pregame will begin at 7:30 on the Dallas Mavericks radio network. Grant, tell the folks where they can find you, what you got going on, man, as you get ready to head to Portland with this team to watch them take on not only the Portland Trailblazers, then on Monday against the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of articles on DallasBasketball.com, and then more episodes next week or whenever for sure with us on Inside the Mavs. And I'm definitely looking forward to being able to talk again about the Mavs playing Portland, but then also the Denver Nuggets, as you mentioned, because that's a team they struggle with on that previous matchup earlier in the season, and talking about big teams. Denver doesn't have like a Karl Anthony Towns at the 4, but they have a lot of size with like Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. We talked about that a lot, earlier in the season. So I'll have a lot of stuff on that, and definitely all on DallasBasketball.com for sure.
Yeah, make sure you're following Grant on Twitter at Grant Afseth. He is traveling all over the country with this team. He'll be in Portland. He'll be in Denver, bringing you all of his fantastic coverage when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs wherever you get your podcast for free. The official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we'll be dropping episodes here on Inside the Mavs. You can subscribe to my channel at Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube as well, and you can also do the same for Grant's channel at Grant Afseth for all of your Mavericks coverage. Again, Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. That'll end our episode on this Friday. Really appreciate you joining us, however, and wherever you may be listening to us and watching us. We'll be back on Monday recapping not only what happened on Saturday between the Mavericks and the Trailblazers, but also getting you ready for the Mavericks taking on the Denver Nuggets, which should be a really fun matchup in Denver, Colorado on Monday night. So until Monday, for Grant, my name is Kevin. This has been Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast on 97.1 The Freak. We'll talk to you on Monday. Peace.